Let's welcome Terry. Give him a hand.
Thanks. Awesome. Well, great to be with you today. I've got a 2-day seminar to give you in 35 minutes, so hold on, we'll go really fast. So, everything that I'm going to talk about, I'm not necessarily just going to talk about the book, but I'm going to give you principles, okay? So everything that I'm going to talk about growing your organization, growing your business, growing your team, so maybe you're a leader, but maybe you're not the leader, maybe you're not the owner, but you're in a position where you have influence. You don't have to have a title to have influence, okay? And so hopefully what I'll be able to give today is a few of those principles that you can apply anywhere that you're at. But all of what we're going to talk about is going to be based in culture. And so it really only works it's really only maximized if you have a very, very healthy culture. Okay, does that make sense? So culture is one of those words that we've all heard, but most people have a very hard time explaining. If we took time to go around the room and just ask, 10 different people, give us your definition of culture, we would probably get 10 different definitions of that. Which is interesting because we know what good culture looks like when we go somewhere and we experience great service, happy employees, people that are going over the top. We know what bad culture, toxic culture looks like when we go to places where the people don't want to be there, they don't love their job, and they could really care less whether you're there, and it comes out in their service. So we kind of know when we experience it what it looks like, but it still makes it very, very difficult to really be able to define. In some ways, it's almost intangible. It's like, I know if I don't breathe that I have trouble breathing, that this is going to be a problem. But at the same time, I really can't see the air that I'm breathing, if that makes sense. And culture really kind of is the air for your organization. So I think one of the reasons there's such an interest in company or organizational culture, because when I wrote the book, I began to do tons and tons of research, obviously, on the subject. And I was amazed at how much seems like was misunderstood, like I just said, about the topic, but yet so much information was out there written about the topic. And I think we recognize it, we admire it, but at the same time, it's still very difficult to understand. So hopefully we'll get a little bit of a base understanding of that, and I'm going to give you about 3 points that'll help you in those areas. So here's the first question I want to ask you today, and if we can make some of this interactive, it'll be helpful. But how would your organization be described by your team? Somebody tell me real quick. If you don't have to be an owner, but wherever you work, if we went in and you asked someone on your team, how would they describe your organization, or how would you describe the organization where you're at? Somebody, quickly. Fun. Yeah. Awesome. Where do you work?
So I volunteer for a nonprofit, Marion Connects, and we just make a party out of it every time.
That's awesome. It's awesome. And so I'm sure if the fact that you're enjoying what you're doing, that the people that you're serving, whatever it is you do, is feeling the extension of that. That's one of the interesting things about when you have a healthy culture, because the experience of your customers is never going to be greater than the experience of your employees. And so if you have very unhappy employees, then they're not going to go over the top to create amazing raving fans on the customer service end. So super, super important. It kind of really is all tied together. So I'd like you to take the time to simply do just a simple exercise. And again, when you go back, especially if you're in some kind of a position of leadership, or maybe you have influence and you can encourage someone, it's really, really important to get a pulse on where your organization is at with their culture. And the way you would do that is just begin to do a poll, exactly that, and kind of poll and get the different definitions. That's a great way to figure out, are we on the same page, marching in the same direction, rowing the boat, in the same direction of where we're trying to end up at? Because if you get a bunch of different answers, it's going to be very difficult to make a whole lot of progress. Does that make sense? And so if culture and the definition of that and the direction of your organization is unclear in the mind of the leaders, it is definitely going to be unclear in the mind of those that are following. And so there has to be some clarity to that. So just taking a little bit of time and asking those questions sometimes can be very, very eye-opening. Culture either happens because leaders intentionally create it, or it happens organically because those that are in the organization create it. So you got to be very, very careful with that. If a leader really doesn't know the direction he wants to go, that vacuum will be filled by other people. And it may not be in the direction or share the values of the organization itself or of the leader or the entrepreneur or whatever the case might be, and it can end up all over the board. And so what happens is most businesses start as a great idea, and they start as a single product or a single service, and it starts getting some traction, and then the owner begins to realize, wow, there's a demand for the service I'm providing, the product I've created, but at the same time, I can't serve any more people. There's only 24 hours in a day. And so you begin to grow an organization or a company because you begin to add people. And there's where it becomes very important, because now someone is representing you, and you want to be able to serve the same product at the same level with the same customer service, and hope the person you just hired is just as passionate about it as you are. Which is very difficult because they haven't made the same sacrifice. They may not see the vision quite as clearly, and it may just be a job to them. And so the culture then becomes very important, or I get 10 people away and the product that was great is now no longer a great experience or providing a solution to the problems that it once did out in the field. And it really wasn't because of the product or the concept or even the idea of how the service should go. It's about the people that you pulled into the culture. So it either happens because you're intentional or it just happens organically. Culture, though, is a shared experience. Probably the best definition, if you just remember that portion of, it's a shared experience of the people that are doing life together. It encompasses the beliefs, the values of the organization, the language of the organization, the norms of the organization. It's about what we all have in common. It ultimately becomes the behavior of the organization. I know when it comes to growing your business, just finding enough people to meet your needs is difficult in the environment that we're in now. There's more job openings than there are people that want to fill them, okay? And so sometimes I'm thinking about how am I going to make payroll taxes? How am I simply, going to make payroll? How am I going to deal with the government? How am I going to deal with my insurance company this month or whatever the case might be? And so it's very easy, I think, to look at something like culture and think, well, that's for a Fortune 500 company. That's for a bigger corporation. But the reality is it's foundational to the success of each organization or each business. And if you change that mindset and kind of take ownership of that, then it begins to influence all the decisions that you're going to begin to make. Many of the things that are going on in our organizations are simply cultural problems. They could move the bottom line, become much, much more profitable if they just simply invested more in their people and paid more attention to the culture. So, so foundational. Sorry, I'm trying to pick through here as I'm going quickly. If you don't define the culture, you're always going to struggle with your identity as an organization, okay? So you need to decide, and if you had notes, I'd encourage you to write this down, but if you were taking notes, you need to decide what you want your organization to be known for, and then you need to compare that with what your customers know about you. In other words, those two things need to match. What I want to be known for, maybe it's my customer service, maybe it's the efficiency of my product or whatever the case might be. That really doesn't matter what I want to be known for. What matters is what am I known for with my customers? And then that's the gap I've got to begin to close. Again, that gap, you have to attack that really with your culture because your culture is your people. Okay, and so that's closing the gap on making sure what you hope to be known for is actually what you're known for when you get out there. The bottom line is there has to be clarity in the organization. There will never be clarity in the minds of the customers when it comes to this either. So I want to talk to you about 3 keys today. Growing your business, growing your organization. We're going to deal with mindset, growing your people, and then creating a culture of care. So I'm going to tell you, we're skimming over the top. Hopefully it just stirs something up because all of these, we could spend a lot of time on this subject matter. But I wanted to give you something as value as you left today, at least to begin to think a little bit more just about this subject. And I think if you apply these, you'll see the fruit of this. But I'd like to start by asking a question. If you had to choose this week, if you had to choose whether you could have more sales or have more raving fans this week, which would you choose? Somebody quickly?
Raving fans.
Raving fans. Who said that? And so why would you choose raving fans?
Because raving fans will create more sales in the future.
Exactly. So one, we all want sales, There you go. We all want more sales, but sometimes we're focusing on the wrong thing. Because the sales part of that, if I'm only focusing on the sales, that's very transactional. If I'm only focusing on the sales, it's a very short-term strategy with limited thinking. But if I'm focusing on create raving fans, the byproduct of creating a raving fan is ongoing sales. So I get both. But one is a strategy more for a long term. Now, how you view that has a big, big influence on all the decisions that you're going to make going forward. How you present it, how you deal with a warranty claim, how you deal with a customer maybe that it's not even a sellable opportunity, because you're viewing that this is a customer for life. Now this is about relationship and relational than it is transactional. Most of what we experience with people is transactional. It's about what I can get from you at this moment with no forethought about having a customer for life and seeing the value and the benefit of that long term. So think about it. If I lose a customer because I didn't make them a raving fan, how much did I really lose? That's a powerful thought. We usually focus a whole lot on how valuable is a customer that refers us. How much did it cost you when you lost a customer? So having the right mindset positions you even when you lose a customer in a transaction, not to lose them or them forget about you in the long run because it's more relational. We've had customers that we've lost because they could buy the same product they thought in their mind somewhere else for a lesser price, only to come back and become a referral source for us and tell us how they wish they would have used us to begin with. If the focus would only been on I invested this much time, this much money, and they chose to go a different direction and I would have viewed that as transactional, then we would have lost that customer for life. But because there's a culture that understands the value of the relationship, they were looking more long term and it still come back around and produced a customer for life. Does that make sense? So it's a difference in how you think. It's your perspective. And perception is reality. So it's kind of like feelings. I can't argue with how you feel, even if your feelings I think are wrong. They're your feelings. And it's kind of like trying to argue with somebody about perception. Their perception of whatever it is they're looking at is their reality. Whether it's reality or not, it's their reality. And so we have to know how we're going to be able to handle that. So the first thing is how we view things truly changes how we do things, okay? So getting the right mindset, getting the right perspective. Here's what I've found to be true of most customers. When it comes to buying, most people like to be sold, or most people hate to be sold, but they love to buy. Now think about that from your own personal experience. You know, especially depending on your personality. You may hate the process of having to go buy, let's say, a car or whatever the case might be, but you love the idea of being able to sit behind the wheel of a new car. And so depending on where you went and what your experience was, it was more about the process than it was the end result, okay? So the other thing that I know about customers is most people don't like to be sold, but they love to be served. And so why do people love to be served? Because when you're served, you feel valuable. You feel valued. You feel special. You feel like somebody has paid attention to you, and that feeling walks away from that. So one of the things that we realized a long time ago is that people soon forget what you do for them, but they never forget how you make them feel. And so that whole process of serving and adding value is super important. The reason why is customers always want a value imbalance when they're buying. Again, think about how you buy. When you go out and you buy something and you get them to come down or you get them to throw in a little something extra or whatever the case might be, you walk away from that feeling like, I paid this amount of money, I got more value than what I paid for because the scale was tipped in your direction, and you walk away feeling good about that. You go away from a transaction where you feel like you paid for more than what you got, you're definitely not a raving fan, and you also walk away probably with buyer's remorse. Make sense? And so, super, super important on understanding just the mindset of people. Now, Walt Disney understood this probably better than anybody. I would say him and P.T. Barnum and some of these guys, they were the master marketers not only of their day, but even of our day. They understood how people thought, what they wanted, and they knew how to get attention. They knew how to stay in front of them. And Walt Disney was just a master, on the customer service. And so Disneyland, which he hand built and actually had an apartment and lived there, in California, I think it was 1959, they were doing an expansion on that park. Now keep in mind, in 1959, they had previously built the entire park for $17 million. In 1959, he did a $6 million expansion. And when he got done with that, he decided at the end, he said, I want to throw a parade at Christmas time for everybody that's in the park. It's going to cost an additional $350,000. Now, $350,000 is a lot of money, but it's a whole lot of money in 1959. And so all of his advisors, his accountants, and everybody that was around him said, this is not a good idea. This is not going to do anything to our bottom line. We've already sold the tickets. The customers, the guests, in their case, are already in our park. Why would we spend $350,000? They don't even expect this. And his comment was, he said, that's exactly the point. They don't expect this, and this is what I want to give them. And what he said was, after that was pretty profound, he said, if we lose them as a customer, we'll spend 10 times that just trying to get them back. So he understood. Now he termed a coin in the 40s that was called plussing, which is just a verb, but what he was saying, his mindset is what can I add to the extra value of any of our guests that come in or any of our customers, where they walk away feeling like this value imbalance that we've talked about has been tipped in their direction. Because he wasn't just trying to see how profitable he could be out of a transaction, he was trying to build a lifelong relationship, and he understood that was far more valuable in the long run than just trying to win in the short run. Does that make sense today? You think that's helpful? Many times to a customer, sales feels like something that gets done to them when it really should be something we do for them. And that perspective is shaped very much by the culture of an organization. If the organization and the leader is teaching the salespeople on their staff, to use unethical tactics, to be extremely pushy, to do all these different things, it really does trickle on down, and it feels like you're trying to do something to me. But yet if the culture is switched and you still have people in different sales positions, but their mindset is I get up every day seeing how I can help somebody, and the byproduct of that is I get paid really, really well to be able to do that. How they view things then will change how they do things. And it comes across totally differently. It's about being paid to solve problems rather than to sell something to someone they really didn't want to begin with because I could talk them into it and their personality just said yes to get me out of their house. Totally different perspective. So, look up here real quick. What do you see up here today? Anybody? What is it? Yeah, well, black dot, but yes, it looks like a hole. Now what's interesting is when you look at this 8.5 by 11, most of our attention focused on the black dot in the middle, which is only a small percentage of the whole picture, really, of what we're looking at. And so when we're talking about how you view things determines how you do things, super, super important on what you're focusing on. Because what you focus on is what you tend to see. Have you ever went out and bought a new vehicle or a different vehicle and man, you could see yourself driving that car and man, there was that certain color and then you bought it and it's like, I haven't seen anything like this. And then you're not in that car or that vehicle for a week and you're driving around and everybody when you go drop your kids off at school, somebody has the exact same vehicle as you have. You go to Walmart, they have the exact same vehicle as you have. You go to church, they're driving the exact same. Before that, you thought you were buying a very unique car. Well, those vehicles were already there all around you, but your focus began to become on those vehicles once you bought one. In other words, now that was your focus, your self-awareness was raised to an entirely different level. So when we're talking about how you view things is how you do things, and that's rooted in your culture, changes everything. Because many times we're looking at things that only other people, or we see things that only other people look at, and there's a big difference. Second thing, all this again is rooted in culture, guys. The key to growing your business is we need to grow our people. If you were to ask me what business I'm in, and we're involved in more than one thing, but our main business is a home improvement business. If you was to ask me though, and we talk about this with our own team, we're in the people business. if I had an opportunity to talk further, I'd tell you that we're really a leadership development company that just happens to provide home improvement solutions. Why? Because that's how we view ourselves. That's what we've embedded into our culture. That's how we drive everything that we do. Now, we provide a commodity that a lot of people provide, but we kind of pride ourselves on providing a different experience that's unique to us. So when we talk about culture, really, culture can become the secret sauce of your organization. People can soon mimic and copy everything that you're doing. Your product, how you do it, what your vehicles look like, what your building looks like, your stationery. But what they can't imitate, what they can't steal, is your culture. And your culture, again, is those shared things amongst your team, amongst your people. That's why that becomes so important to a high-performance team, but it also is so important because it gives you a competitive advantage that other people can look at. They can do all the other things, but they can't figure out why they don't get the same result. There's something about, out of everything that we do, if you think about whatever industry you're in, whatever organization you're serving in, there's somebody doing something very similar to what you're doing. And probably what you're doing is about 80%, if you're highly successful, about 80% of that is identical. You know, you think about going to a restaurant. I mean, they're going to clean they need to clean their restrooms. There's a certain amount of food they need to cook. If it's a fast food, they're probably going to have a drive-through. There's certain things that are just going to be similar in all those situations. But if you can change 20% of what you do, it can make 100% of the difference. And so the culture that you're creating, which is your people, give you that high engagement that they're not just showing up because they're getting paid, because they legitimately care about what they're doing. Okay? And because the mindset is, it's not what I'm doing to somebody, it's what I get to do for somebody. That comes out on the other end for the people that are changing dollars for service. And it makes a huge impact. Does that make sense today? I strongly believe these two things. I say them over and over again. Potential is not what you are, it's what you can become. So you need to remember that. We think about that anytime we're interviewing someone to join our team, where we'll select 1 out of 100 people that we'll talk to legitimately. Because we're looking at not just the position that's opening, but where we will be as a company 5 years from now. So if you fit the culture and you have the right character, the other stuff, as long as you're competent, we can grow you into that. So what is your potential and your eagerness to learn to be able to be where we're going to be at 5 years from now? So in our case, we don't want employees. We want career-minded people. So I don't need someone that has the aptitude and the desire and only the ability to fill the opening. I need someone that wants to grow as we grow, so I'm not having to start all over again. Make sense? And so that mindset begins to change who you hire. In other words, you're creating a culture. You're gathering a group of people that share the same mindset. They share the same values. The values in your organization are really, they stem from what your beliefs are. And then they get put on a piece of paper and they become your values or your core values. And then out of that becomes the behavior of all the people that work for you. They stem from all that. So they're all interconnected. So we need to quit looking at team members as an expense and a line item and start looking at them as an investment, because the reality is they're our biggest asset. They are that thing in our culture that makes you different and makes you unique. And so if I truly believe that, it's going to drive my behavior and my influence. Where I spend money on them, how I invest money towards them, where I spend my time, all of that, because I actually believe that. How I view it will drive how I do it. So few things that we need to understand regardless of the industry. We're in the people business first and foremost. Doesn't matter what you're doing today, remember you're in the people business. Doesn't matter if it's a plumbing business, a marketing business, it just doesn't matter. You're in the people business. So move from the commodity of what you're doing to the reality of you're serving people, and begin to get that mindset as you start moving forward. So second, businesses don't fail or succeed, but people do. So why should I be investing in people? Because it's really not the business that fails or succeeds. It's the results of the people. And so whether that's the leadership of the group or people on downline, it doesn't matter. It still all comes down to people. So if we truly believe that statement, we need to have a plan to invest in our people, to develop our people, to coach our people, to mentor our people. Again, Sometimes I think people hear this or they read about it. It's like, well, that's all great. If I was a Fortune 500 company, how are you ever going to grow by yourself if you don't invest in other people to share the load? I can promise you, if your dream is no bigger than what you can accomplish, you're dreaming too small. So you're going to have a team that you're going to be able to pull together to help you go where you see that. You are the architect of the future, and you see it. When you begin to cast that vision, then you begin to attract the people that begin to help you with that. Okay, and so when you do that, then you owe it to them to begin to invest in them. And you will see the results of that. Many businesses use people, write this down if you would, because this is life-changing to what we're talking about. Many businesses use people to grow business. What if you used your business to grow people? Slightly different, but just turn that around. Most businesses use people to grow the business. What if you used your business to grow the people? It's back to what we were talking about sales a while ago. If I focus on growing the people, the byproduct is my business will grow. If I only focus on growing my business, I'm probably going to have a revolving door of people that are going to feel like they're a number, they're going to feel like they're used, that are going to feel like they're not appreciated. And all those things represent what we're talking about, which is culture. In that case, bad culture, maybe toxic culture. What does that cost us? Constantly having to recruit new people, constantly having to retrain people, constantly having inexperienced people on your staff. A lot. It's probably immeasurable, honestly. So organizations with great cultures and long-term thinking tend to think this way because they understand as the people grow, the growth in the business is simply a byproduct. So there's a lot of ways to go about that. I'll give you a few real quick. Ongoing training, retreats, conferences, just simply providing resources. Do you think there'd be a benefit in providing resources to help the people that work with you or for you or on your team, whether you own the business or not, to simply help manage their money? Well, that's not what we do here. Well, you're going to manage them when they have a financial crisis, and they're going to think you don't pay them enough, when the reality is you may pay them $100,000, but they're spending $120,000. That is not is that your problem? Well, it is now. The fact they can't manage what they have now creates a stress at home and forces them to go look elsewhere, when reality is they can go find something. If that's the problem, they're only dealing with the symptom. So now they go find a $120,000 a year job, but now they spend $130,000. You follow me? So we need to be invested in the people that we're serving, because you're going to manage that and you're going to deal with that one way or the other. You can help them plan for their future. You can give them resources on how to become better parents. I mean, have any of you ever had to miss work because of a stressful situation at home with one of your kids? Probably. It's just reality. It's life. So resources and helping teach people maybe how to be more organized, more disciplined, to communicate better. Well, that's not what we do. We build houses. No, you're in the people business, and you have people working for you. And so these skills are super, super important. You know, we tell the guys that swing the hammers at our place every day, we tell them, listen, you're craftsmen and professionals, and today you're going out serving ladies and gentlemen. So you need to have the mindset of that when you walk out the door. Now, I don't need someone that's just great with their hands, but they have poor people skills. And when you can bring both of those worlds together, you not only raise their self-confidence, but you raise the level of experience for everybody that's doing business with your organization. That's powerful. That is an ingredient to create a long-term customer. Third thing today. Well, actually, let me give you just a few more things. I'll share just a few things that we do. We lean heavily at our organization on an individual personal development plan. So when people are hired and they come in, they're automatically paired with a coach. And they're paired with that coach depending on the position for X number of weeks. After that, then they're paired with a training coach in their specific field for the course of like the next 90 days, 1 day a week. No matter what they're doing, that one day they stop and they go with that training coach. Well, what is that? That's really mentoring. That's really coaching them. What we're doing is we're investing in that person. I talk about it a lot. So I have a book up here today, and I'm a huge reader. I mean, I have a huge collection of books. I read constantly because I'm not the smartest guy in the room. But what I've realized, if I could spend $25 though, and I could get 25 years of experience from somebody else, and I can read that in 2 or 3 hours, that's a smart investment on my time. Guys, that's the cheat code for many of the things that we're dealing with in life. Parenting, being a better husband, making your marriage better, handling your finances, being a better leader, all those different things. So when somebody writes a book, what they're doing is they're taking their life experience, which is usually come at the cost of a lot of mistakes, and you can buy the book and read that, and you can glean the wisdom from that. And so wisdom is learning from the mistakes of other people. Experience is learning from your own mistakes. So we put them on a personal development plan. It consists of like over 200 books. And keep in mind, this is in a construction company where I may have interviewed somebody in the beginning. So tell me about the last book you read. I don't know. 20 years ago when I graduated, it was... And then we put them on a track where they're reading a book every 2 weeks. Now, they don't have to read it. They can listen to it. But they do that for the first 10. And then what happens is eventually, if they want to continue to grow, there's different tracks that they can get on, for the career path that they're on. But by that point, they see the value in it. I sat in a meeting Tuesday where guys were going around, and these were some of the things that they were sharing on how it had impacted their lives, how their wife seen them differently, how they were more intentional and present with their kids. It wasn't just all about how they were more proficient at work, but we have a whole lot of happy people that come to work because their home life's a little happier. And that culture at home comes over into the culture, that you have at work, and then it spills out into the customers that you're going to, serve every day. So, third thing, you want to grow your business, you need to create a culture of caring. This will be the final point that I'll give you as we kind of land this thing. If culture really is the secret sauce for any successful organization, then what kind of culture should it be? It needs to be one of caring. In other words, it needs to be one that who's ever on your team feels like they're not a number and they feel like that they're valued. So if you look at just the modern workforce today, we probably wouldn't describe most people in the American economy, American workforce, as being super passionate, about what they're doing, a bunch of enthusiasm, a whole lot of creativity and energy. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We have people that are looking and, they're watching the clock. They're ready to get off work. They can tell you 6 years, 4 months, 17 days, I retire. That doesn't really sound like somebody that loves what they're doing every day. Okay, so what is missing? Now you flip the script and you find someone that they never want to retire because they love what they do and they just happen to get paid for it. What kind of experience is that person giving to the people they're serving? It's elevated, it's over the top. And that's what you want to create with a healthy culture, because it gives you a highly engaged team where you can take someone out there, and it doesn't matter whether you're there or not, they're giving more than what is required. When I look at our team, they give more than what's required. They're passionate about what they do, and it shows with everybody that they serve, okay? Because it's almost like it's not mundane, it's more missional. It's not about a paycheck, it's about purpose. So they feel something differently, so it translates into their performance, which gives anybody in business or on a team a competitive advantage. You ever been the person on the team that's having to pick up the slack for everybody else on the team that really didn't want to be there? So even if it's not directly affecting the bottom line of your paycheck, it may be affecting your workload. So it's in all of our best interest to use our influence to make sure that we have a healthy culture. So how does a team leader turn a business as usual team into a high performance team? It goes back to kind of building this caring culture, but the behavior in your organization, like I said earlier, it stems from your values. And your values stem from your belief system. But ultimately, they become the behavior in the organization. We go over this in the book, I don't have time to go back there, but that's why all these things are so important. Because I think we hear stuff about mission statement, vision statement, and culture. We think of those as terms of pieces of artwork that hang on a wall in a hallway that somebody gets paid to dust. And unfortunately, that's all they are in many cases, but that's not what they should be. They should be deriving the behavior of the 99th person that was hired in your organization to know, this is how I filter through the decision-making process, through the values that we have, and does this align with the direction that we're going and where we're going to be 5 years from now? And I feel like I have purpose in what I'm doing. It's not just about my paycheck on Friday. I feel fulfilled because I'm doing something that matters. That's a totally different mindset, which will produce a totally different result on the performance side, and again, a totally different result on the customer experience side. So, here's the question: how do I make my employees feel valued like that? Two things to remember. Culture is only healthy as the leader. So that's where you'd start. And your customer's experience are never going to be greater then your employees' experience. So if you don't remember anything else and you remember those two things, they'll bookend a lot of the things that you need to work through in order to create a really, really healthy culture. So how do I make my team feel valued? Well, you start by caring about what they care about. It's really not rocket science. Start by caring about what they care about. So if somebody in their family is at the hospital, you need to care about that. Somebody on your team has a baby, you ought to celebrate with that. Somebody's going through a really, really hard time and they're grieving and have a loss, you should care about that. And there's ways you can demonstrate that you care and kind of put your money where your mouth is. And it creates this culture of caring, not just for the person you're caring for, but for all those people that are watching how that person means something to you outside of just what they do on a day-to-day basis. That become the ingredients to create the kind of culture that we're talking about. We pay for premarital counseling. When somebody gets engaged at our place, we'll send them for a 3-day, 2-night retreat somewhere in Georgia because it's a good investment in them. It shows them we value them. It's also a smart business. I don't know about you, but we study more for a driver's license than we do to get our marriage license. And then we spend more money to get married and a whole lot more to get divorced and no money in between to try to figure out how we do this right. And so we invest money on the front end, hopefully that they're not having to go through some of the same hiccups that we're having to go through. And then we have a more engaged customer. We also have a new fiance coming into the mix that has a whole different first impression about what our organization is about and what we care about, because the husband or the wife has already been telling them about that, and now they see that because they see what we value and where we've invested that money. Somebody has a baby, we provide the dinner meals for the first week after that. We provide what we call baby bucks because we know they're going to be buying diapers and maybe formula. So they'll get gift cards for the first 4 weeks. You don't have to do that, but when you do that, it sends a message that, you know what, you're important, and we also care and we understand there's other things going on in your life besides what you're doing when you're sitting behind the desk or when you're in the truck or answering the phone or whatever the case might be. So think through how you could take a holistic approach to really invest in the lives of your teammates, the people you're leading, the people in your company, that sends the message, you know what, you guys really care. Even providing resources that have to do with budgeting and stuff like that. Sometimes we'll give the book to the entire company and we'll go through about finances. They'll read it on their own time. We'll pay for it. We'll devote a couple minutes in our weekly meeting to it. And then at the end of that, when it was on finances, then we brought in a financial advisor at the end. So if people hadn't thought about investing, if they hadn't thought about a budget, and so we kind of put those resources in front of them. But it also showed them that we cared about that. Does that make sense? And so it doesn't have to be expensive, but it does have to be intentional. So, do you want a high-performance team? I'm telling you, our team works extremely hard. They do more than what's required. They care deeply, and they serve others passionately. But they also, if you ask them, they would describe where they work as this is a brotherhood. If they're a guy, this is a family. And they talk about terms that you typically just don't hear in a work environment because it was very intentional not to create a typical work environment, if that makes sense. So listen, as we wrap this up today, I want to challenge you. Determine what you're going to do to be different than all the companies or all the organizations in your field. Challenge yourself to how can I go back and look at every area that I'm involved in, even if it's just my team, and kind of begin the spark of being a culture of care. What can I do to show those people around me that I really care? Give people a purpose that goes beyond money. You don't have to be the owner of the company. If you want me to work harder and work for something that's necessarily not mine, I need a purpose behind that. So give me a purpose that's beyond money. Communicate that. Give them a purpose that's beyond their paycheck. Albert Einstein once said this, and I thought this was really good. He says, not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. And think about that. So when a person in a job feels like that they're valued and they're adding value to others, they're making a difference, they're not just watching the clock, they're not just counting down the days to their retirement. They're excited about going to work because they're a part of something that's bigger than themselves, which we're honest, most of us want to do that. We want to feel like our life matters. We want to feel like at the end, you know what? I left a mark that can't be erased. I did something that's going to live beyond me. That's what you want to give for the people that work for you. A good culture will do that, and it will do it intentionally. It won't do it by accident. They need to feel like they're growing. They're going to live up to their potential. So remember, culture can only be as healthy as the leader. I don't know what you're leading, but it's not going to rise above you. So you need to make sure that you're healthy. And your customer's experience is never going to be greater than your employee's experience. Apologize I went so fast today. We touched on topics more so to kind of be thought-provoking because they weren't in depth, they weren't exhaustive as far as going through all that, but they're all rooted in culture. If you'd like more of that, we actually have a podcast called The Cultioneer. It's named after the book. I will sit back here and we will have the book today. You can also order it on Amazon. But it just goes a whole lot more in depth on the importance of culture. And the byproduct of that is you're going to have a whole lot more happy customers. Thanks, I appreciate it.
He's going to the corner, but this is a chance for you to ask Terry a question or to make a comment. You don't have to answer every single one of these because there's plenty of minds in the room that we can learn from. Does anybody have a question for Terry or a comment about the topic today? Yes.
So similar to what would happen to a local church assembly, you could be a few funerals away from a revival. If I'm in a big corporation like I am, and my individual team is strong and supportive, but I have a generational gap between people that have been there 20 years and 2 days, how do you want to change the culture but get the buy-in of the older generation that maybe like my mom, she also works there, she's 72 and still working, and you have somebody that's right out of school. How do we get them to merge to change the culture?
I think you have to model it, number one. Then you have to be intentional about it. So we learn a whole lot more about what we see rather than what we say. So modeling that and then seeing the results of what you're doing, and obviously making sure that your team is healthy and your team is what you want to see emulated, that kind of becomes the model, and hopefully that becomes the inspiration. And then just look for opportunities to use what influence you have. You're probably interacting with some of the other departments. I don't know, so there's ways then when I'm doing that, how can we as this team add value every time we interact with that team and serve them? And that becomes the key, because as you serve them and add value, people want to add value to you. Have you ever heard of the law of reciprocity? If you think about going, I don't even know if they still do this, but years ago you would see a certain group of people, they would be in an airport and they would be passing out roses. And then they become smart because people didn't want to take the roses because they didn't want to buy them. So they would give you the rose, but once you took the rose, they would ask you for the donation. What was at work there? There was the law of reciprocity. Because you took something that I gave you, now I feel like I owe you something and give you something back, even though I wouldn't have never made a donation before. It's the same thing when you go to serve people and add value. They just feel like I need to do something to reciprocate that.
It's a good question. Somebody else? Question or comment for today? Don't be shy. Anybody? So we want to thank Terry for being here today. Would you give him another round of applause?
Thank you.
You may have a question or comment that you just want to talk directly to Terry. He's going to stick around to talk with you. He's got a table full of books. Welcome you to come up and take a look. Also meet someone new today. So we've got a great group here. Before you leave, introduce yourself, meet someone. Great chance for you to network. I want you to meet one special person that's here today too. She'll get me later for embarrassing her. But my wife, Rocio, yes, it's her birthday today. So if you haven't met Rocio, say hi to her as you leave. So thank you all for being here. Come back and join us for another workshop or a class. And appreciate you guys being, growing your leadership and being part of this. Thank you so much. Have a great day.